like to thank all of our panelists for being here today and starting off this conversation about the intersection of food and craft. So we have 4 esteemed panelists with us today. To begin, Tim Hollingsworth, who is the chef owner of Otium, which is the topic we'll be focusing on today. Tim is an award-winning chef who has appeared on various television shows and who's received all kinds of honors within the food world. And he originally worked at French Laundry and has a deep history in terms of California cuisine and pushing food in LA forward in a very innovative way. We have Davillier, who is the owner of Neptune Glassworks, and Yuri's background is both in engineering and fine art, and he weaves all that together in what he makes in his studio downtown, and has done numerous lighting projects for restaurants all over the city and all kinds of other kinds of projects. Chris Earl is a furniture maker here in LA who's making all kinds of objects in addition to furniture, I should say, and who has a background in the food world originally, and his fine art background as well informs his practice today and his aesthetic. And Sabrina Judge is the owner of Irving Place Studio, which has a very long LA history that we'll hopefully talk about as well. She founded Irving Place along with her mother, the master LA ceramic artist Dora Delarios. She has worked on various restaurant commissions as well as domestic functional ceramics, and they produce other kinds of objects as well. So to begin, I wanted to ask you, Tim, how you came to involve craft in the big way that it is involved in Odium, and what your initial ideas were for the restaurant and goals.
You know, when coming up with the concept, when presented with a space and sort of an idea, you have to start somewhere, and ultimately that starting point for me was what the restaurant was going to be and who the clientele was going to be. It was less about the food at that point and coming up with the concept. It's very kind of natural to create dishes and stuff like that. I've been doing it for a long time. So the messaging for me was, okay, I'm an out-of-towner. I'm not from Los Angeles. I'm here. How do I tell the city of angels basically that I am, I respect what everybody does here, and I respect the industries that exist, and I just want to be a part of that. I don't want to come interrupt that. And part of, I think one of the biggest and best choices that I made was inviting amazing local artists to participate in that and to share their craft in Otium and what we do, and to ultimately bring it to an unbelievably designed space and warm and cozy environment that has a sense of comfort as well as this really kind of elevated quality as well.
So the idea of terroir, which you might want to describe for everybody from the chef perspective, is a big focus within the food world, and you really brought that into the environment by working with the artists who are sitting next to you. Why? What does that mean, and how does the idea of it going from the plate and into the whole environment change how people experience a restaurant?
It's no longer enough to just serve amazing food. A restaurant and experience, you know, you're combating with so many other great restaurants, so many other great experiences. You really have to kind of hit a home run in all the different aspects of it. So the decor of the restaurant, how it feels, the music, the textures, the cuisine, of course. So all of those things kind of took place. The terroir, when coming up with the dish, we look for where we get our ingredients is very, very important. How things are raised ultimately makes our job easier, and we're really there to create life for people, right? Food is life. Food is something that is nourishing. Food ultimately is something we all need on a daily basis. So that terroir that we use, I think, the same sort of sense in the design with the terroir of Los Angeles and of the craftsmanship that exists and the artisanship, I think is something that we really put focus on, and ultimately it wasn't one person's vision or anything like that. It was allowing people and artists and people that are really great at what they do to have an impact and to have a voice and state what they want. So when I create a menu or when I create dishes, a lot of times I use the help of the chefs around me, and the way that we do that is that we, no one has ownership fully over a dish. It's all a combination and a collaboration, and I think that the collaboration that existed with creating Odium will be meaningful and long-lasting, hopefully.
I'd love to hear from you, Yuri, about collaborating on the lighting for Odium, which is such a strong part of the environment, and how you came up with that concept and design process.
Sure. Well, I'll say it was really quite an experience working with Tim to be pulled in on the project at the point where we did, when it was still such a blank slate, and working with a couple of really amazing design firms that did an amazing job at that. So one of the things that got me into doing lighting design originally was an experience at a restaurant where I realized what an impact the quality of the light in the space has. So I started off as an engineer, and then started blowing glass. I've been blowing glass for about 15 years. And about 5 years ago, I had this experience while I was out and realized, like, oh my God, it's all about the light. Like, I want to sculpt that experience for people and like make something really amazing. It's, like the texture of the light in a space. It's something that when it's done well, you don't notice it at all. That's kind of the point. So and we were that transition, that movement into that new path in my career happened right at the moment when I met Tim. So being able to pull that together with him was really a phenomenal experience. So the design, really, it always comes from conversations with the client to figure out what their intent is, what they want to do, and so through those conversations, we talked about how to spread the light. We didn't want it to look flat, so it's the piece in particular covers, it's probably like 1,200 square feet or something like that to cover the entire space, but we also didn't want it to just be this linear piece. So it exists in multiple levels, and it moves, and it pushes and pulls, and every single part of that thing was handmade by me and a couple other people. We've gotten a lot better at that sense, but it was brutal making all those little bits and pieces. Yeah. So I mean, to answer the question succinctly is, it's a conversation with the client, and then just trying to decide what that intent is and how we're going to implement that, and what the look is that they want to achieve, and then how do we do it.
It raises the issue for all three of you of changing the scale of your practices for these large commissions and how that balances out. So I know, Sabrina, you've talked about having to execute a large order for a restaurant and what that means in terms of production. And so could you talk about how you balance that within your practice and business as a model?
Balance is a funny word for me, because it's always just, well, you just do the work. I mean, you keep going. You can't. And with ceramics, it's so time consuming. It takes a month to get a piece out, and so you can create 50 pieces. It's still, you've got the drying time of the clay. First you have to throw the piece, trim it, then it has to dry, then it gets bisked. Every piece is worked on 12 times by hand. So it's an extremely labor-intensive process. And then the kiln is only so big, so you can only get so many pieces in it. So it was impactful. It's impactful when you have to get out 500 pieces, and you can't. You just have to spread it over months and months and months, because there are other things that have to get done also. So luckily, there were stages, there were delivery stages, and so Tim has always been wonderful and flexible and totally understands that it's a long process for us. It's more like a tightrope type of balance than like actual mindful, like I'm going to create this, because we're impacted by the weather too. So if it's not warm enough, things take longer to dry. So there's only so much control I have over it, So that's the type of medium that clay is. It's hard, because it depends on the weather. It's not. Yeah. Does that answer? Okay.
Great. So Chris, in terms of furniture, which Tim mentioned earlier, the idea of what the customer, the person dining in the restaurant experiences the most, and you created the seating, and that's like very much the tactile experience for most people. And I wonder what kind of ideas you brought into the design of those forms that you were making for Otium.
Yeah, so Otium was a really fun project in that, as Tim already described, I was given a lot of latitude in what I could do with the seating. They had some basic parameters that they needed to meet, but other than solid wood construction and upholstered seat, and a point or two of reference in terms of overall aesthetic, they basically just said elegant rusticity and go for it, which is super fun. Specifically in terms of taking into account the customer, with a restaurant, you need to account for obviously every body type that's out there. So you're trying to hit a good middle ground in terms of scale and ratio. At a restaurant particularly, there are parameters obviously for a chair. A chair is a chair, and most tables are 30 inches high and all of that. So you need to fit within those, but it's the little nuances that'll make all the difference in the world. Just a little bit of a pitch on the back can change whether you're comfortable eating, like at the table, or if you're spilling in your lap every third bite. So we did prototyping process, worked through a bunch of those, to do all the little final tweaks. And at the end of the day, I think we came up with something that really worked. Not to say there weren't bumps along the way. We had a couple late nights just redoing some joinery and stuff, even once the restaurant was opened, just to make sure that some of the higher stools were robust enough to stand up to their awesome cocktails that they make there. Yeah, but overall, I would say at the end of the day, we came up with something that I think we're all pretty proud of.
And specific materials, choices, why that wood, why the palette even? And Tim, you might want to also jump in on this.
Yeah, as far as palette in terms of the upholstery and that, I'll let Tim speak to that because that was up to them. They chose the materials for that. The chairs are built out of walnut. We wanted to do solid wood construction, obviously. Walnut is just a pleasure to work with. It's the wood I go to whenever I have a chance. So the second that they were good with the tone of a good American walnut, it's all sustainably sourced. And the second that they were on board with that, I jumped on it.
And copper.
And copper, yeah. Copper as well. I personally like to incorporate elements of rusticity into my work. I find that adding raw metals such as copper and brass do a lot. Just a little nod can really make a piece pop or stand out or just be unique. And so copper was a great fit for the overall space because it ages so well. Every piece in that restaurant is used. It's a beautiful space when you walk in. There's beautiful boards and ceramics and all of that. But every one of those pieces is not up there just for decor. It's getting pulled down. I've witnessed it. It gets pulled down, used, washed, put back up, reused again. So copper just lends itself to that. It takes on that perfect patina.
I think when developing those textures and materials that we use, the color palette, the different types of wood that we used, it was very important. This is not my background. This is more of the designers, but it's very important to not use too many materials, too many colors, too many textures, so really trying to look towards real materials, wood, real metals, ceramics, clay, mud, using things like that would complement each other and balance each other versus fight against each other. That was really the goal. Not too many colors, not too many shades of wood, not too many textures as far as metals.
It sounds like it could apply towards food too, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, as we construct a dish, there needs to be balance. There needs to be, sometimes it's pretty linear. Sometimes, you don't want something, it's all about texture and it's all about one texture. Think of something like a chawanmushi or, like a custard in that sense where that's what you're going for. When you're creating a dish that's a small dish versus a large dish, it needs to be a little bit more interesting. It needs to keep you entertained throughout the course of eating that full dish. So we really look towards not having too many ingredients, but having enough ingredients or ingredients prepared in different ways, right? So if it's a potato, we have a cod with potatoes, clams, and burnt allium. So the potatoes are, we have a fork crushed potato, we have a potato mousse, we have like a fried potato dust. We have on the onions on that, we have a burnt onion puree, we have a leek ash, we have pieces of onion, we have fresh onion in there as well. So all of these things, you might not notice as you're eating it, but they help get you through it and keep you engaged throughout that meal.
So Sabrina, I wonder, as far as thinking about the food that's going into the ceramics and how people are viewing your handmade ceramics versus, what used to be very common, the white porcelain plate, what you hope they notice about your dishware.
Well, I think in a restaurant setting, you don't want them really to notice the dish. You want the food to be highlighted, and I think that's what happens just with our shapes. But I think what they do get from our work and why Tim likes our work and other chefs like our work is there's a different feel to it. You can feel the difference between something handmade and slip cast or ram pressed, or So I think it's a feeling. They can, because our pieces are so, people say they look perfect and they don't understand that each piece is thrown on a wheel and worked on 12 times by hand. Because they don't have experience. Now people are gaining more experience with handmade dinnerware, but it just looks like a regular plate. It's not, the chefs know that, they feel it, and there's a different feeling. It's just a different feeling. There are a lot of anomalies. Once you really look at 12 of them next to each other, they do not look perfect. There's some wonkiness. But because they're so highly crafted and worked on, there's this level of perfection I want to get out of each piece, even though it's a plate. It means a lot to me. The craftsmanship of it means a lot to me. I mean, just hand sanding the finishware is something that a lot of people don't do because it's a little nuts, but we're a little nuts, so it's okay. But so again, it's a feeling. It's a feeling, I think.
Yuri, I wonder if you've noticed, because lighting is so focal in LA restaurant design, and I wonder what you think are kind of the defining characteristics of LA, the LA aesthetic right now, how you play into that as well.
That's a good question. I think, honestly, one of the biggest challenges I think right now is this transition from going from incandescents to LEDs and still having LEDs look sexy. So right now I spend like 20% of my day shopping for light bulbs. It's like just looking for new technologies and trying to figure out how we're going to incorporate this new technology and still have it look rustic and handmade and have it have that feel, that warmth that everybody wants. So, and we struggled with that. And at the Odium, it ended up being we ended up combining 2 different color temperatures of light bulbs, which was something I've never done before and never even considered that would be a way to do it. But it ends up throwing light in it gives like a fullness to the light that I hadn't expected. As far as the design itself goes, it always starts with the light. It always starts with what that light source is going to be, and then we always work around that. But a lot of the restaurants we've been working on lately, it's definitely there's a cleanness to it, which LA really loves. But people are still really excited about the handmade aspect. And one of the things that we've been doing lately, which I'm really excited about, is using rapid prototyping techniques. But starting with the rapid prototype techniques, but then hand finishing them all. So we'll 3D print a bunch of parts, but then we'll like slather it with an epoxy and then hand sand it and hand paint it and hand finish it. So we can get some of like the technical aspects we need built into these parts, but then like have that outside finish actually feel like a handmade piece. So I think that's one of the things that we've been working on lately that a lot of people have been responding to strongly. So,
for any of you who would like to respond on the LA restaurant design aesthetic in this day and age, what you see it as defined by. I wonder, Tim, if that's in planning the restaurant, if that was, I imagine from the business standpoint, very key, is what you want it to feel like and look like and how that fits into the bigger picture. And I think in some ways, Odium has defined that aesthetic as of several years ago that now other restaurants have picked up on. But
yeah, I mean, I think you always see cycles. You always see, somebody comes up with something, and then you see several variations. Some of that's copying, some of that's just being inspired by. So I think the direction that LA is going, I think, as far as food and culture. I think LA is the most exciting city in the country easily. It's a great city. It has amazing food, and people are finally really embracing it on all the different levels of dining, whether it be a taco truck or a 3 Michelin star restaurant. So I think that where it's going in LA is. Before my observation of LA was always very sceney. You go to a place and it's like who's there and how you're dressed and all these kind of things. And I don't think it's like that anymore. Yeah, it still exists a little bit, but ultimately, it's people are embracing other people's styles in all different neighborhoods, and I think it's exciting, and I think it's such an exciting time because people aren't scared to take a step and put themselves out there, and they're comfortable with the fact that it's not just about the restaurant that exists today, and then 6 months later the next exciting restaurant goes in. There has to be this continuity that carries forth.
Yeah, people have their favorite places that they go to, and they want to feel that atmosphere and have that food. And I think that there are so many different choices out there now. And the ambiance is, I think it exists a lot more than it did, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. People are caring. I think that restaurants are caring more about the experience, and it's got to start with the chefs and the owners. And it just seems like there's a lot more placed on the aesthetic, and certainly from the food all the way down to the chair you're sitting on, the plates you're eating on. I mean, it was really special. You started this, really that type of detail, attention to detail, and everything, and bringing craftspeople. Tim was, I don't know of it existing before you really to the level, honestly, and I think people are doing that now, and it's good. And it also helps just bring awareness to the local craftspeople that are all around us in making beautiful things, and they need to be supported so that they can keep bringing beautiful handmade things which have so much feeling, so much more feeling than production or manufactured pieces. And it's important to have that in our lives. And I think that the reason why it's being appreciated now is really because we're so attached to our devices, right? We don't have that feeling. There's a lack of connection that's happened, and we've lost human feeling. So I think that people really respond to all of these pieces because they're made by hand. And they may not even, it's not an intellectual thing, it's just literally, oh, I can tell, that's different. I can tell, I'm drawn to it, I feel it, and the natural lighting to everything, I think it all ties together to the human experience.
Yeah, I think Odium definitely was a model for a lot of restaurants to adopt the ceramics that are now very much more commonplace, and it's really added an element to the creative economy of employing the work of all these local artists in the service of the restaurants. So yeah, it's an important point, definitely. I wonder back to the kind of ideas, Chris, maybe of how you can gauge, and this might be a question for Tim as well, but the response of people in the restaurant to these kinds of objects and how they notice that they are handcrafted, and how we could gauge what kind of impact it's having.
Yeah, absolutely. To be honest, I was actually somewhat surprised by the amount of engagement we did get specifically from Otium. I think it does speak to the authentic nature of what Tim and the rest of the team developing that we're trying to do. It really came through that they did honestly care about who were producing these pieces that were going to live and create the overall atmosphere, the overall home that Otium became. So even like compared to previous projects, we've seen way more interest and way more inspiration, or people inquiring specifically in regard to that space and seeing how they could move forward with ideas that it sparked in them as well.
And how did it affect your woodworking and your furniture design and the business overall?
Yeah, well, it made us busier for sure, which is great. Any project that does that is well welcomed. But it was also just a great learning experience. Even I alluded to doing some work on retooling the chairs, some stretchers and supports. We were able to rework that. Just seeing the ins and outs that a restaurant that's really doing well for itself, the amount of traffic that it gets. It's been really interesting to see, even over the years that it's been open now, we'll go in and do some tune-ups for chairs and stuff as things wear. So it's invaluable to be able to see how a piece ages over the course of, how many years has it been now? It's been 4 years, right? I was going to say 4 or 5. So to be able to see a piece that's aged 4 years in restaurant time is 20 in your home, right. Like guaranteed, yeah. If not more. So that's been great to see, how everything's held up, and it still feels relevant 4 years later. It feels like a new space,
So one of the forms of seating that you designed for the restaurant is the stool, and that plays into the open kitchen concept that is now so popular. And I think that also puts the work of the kitchen really at the forefront, and the craft of making the food at the center of the restaurant. That's become more and more common only recently, and I wonder how that fit into things that you were planning. Does it make a stage in your eyes of the performance of crafting the food, and how does it change the experience of the restaurant?
Yeah, I mean, that was a very intentional thing, and I wouldn't say I started there. I would say that through limitations of the physical space, we had to have the bathrooms in a certain area, we had to have the stairs in a certain area, there had to be proper exiting, there had to be a divide. So there's these things that have to exist based on, we're built on a bridge, we're cantilevered out over Hope Street. So, these things add challenges, but also through those challenges, I think you come up with more interesting solutions. So the fact that the kitchen is the way it is started from me not being able to design it the way that I wanted to, and then and then ultimately, those limitations led to, why don't we do it like this? And there are a lot of open kitchens. Like, there's been open kitchens for years, but I think I honestly can't name one where there's not a divide, there's not a barrier, there's not something in front of you that separates you. And for me, the benefit of that and the story behind it and the feeling that I get from it is that there's no separation. This isn't like the kitchen 50 years ago where the chefs are in the back and they're screaming and they're doing all this stuff. This is like, we're on a stage, and guess what? We're working hard. We're artists. We're creating what we're doing, and we want to show you. We want you to see behind the scenes. We want you to see the successes and the imperfections. It's always perfect in the kitchen. There's mistakes that happen, things that get burnt, flare-ups, fires, like different sort of things. And I think people want to see behind the scenes nowadays. People want to see what's going on. Sabrina talked about how there's variance in pieces, and when you put 12 plates next to each other, there are, and you know what? That's a beautiful thing. That's amazing. You can tell that it's handmade. Talked about the textures and talked about how people experience the restaurant and the textures and stuff like that. And I think what I noticed the most is that people touch it. People pick up the bowl. People slide their hand, across the chair. People don't necessarily touch the lighting, but we don't want them to do that either. But they definitely, their eyes are drawn to it, and they're taking photos with it and of it. And I think when you have people interacting with your space like that, that adds a level of dimension that is more than just food and cuisine, for sure.
Final comments before we open up for questions?
Yeah, that's one. There was this sort of touched back on something that you guys were touching on a second ago. But one of the things that is, I think, a bit less common, maybe hopefully it's getting more common, is that Tim was such a advocate for all of us throughout this process, and still is. So I still get phone calls or emails from people saying, "Oh my God, I saw your stuff at this restaurant. How do I get one?" And then I send them a quote, and they're like, "Ugh." Maybe not. I don't know. But so I guess what I wanted to get at was that, like, something that I think is new, and it's not like this sort of a one-way street where we're just like dropping off some stuff into a space. It's a conversation that's still going on to this day. So, and for that, I thank you. I think we all do. So yeah. Mm-hmm. Right.
Final comments?
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, I feel like the support that you've given all the craft people from day one, and even including us on the website, and doing the little videos, and it was very inclusive. This is not normal. I mean, it's not, but that's how important it was, to create that. And so, yeah, I'm very appreciative. It's special.
Yeah, I think that says it all. I think that says it all. I mimic both those sentiments. I think the one further thought that I had, which is fairly redundant, but when you were speaking of trends that you've noticed in restaurants in Los Angeles, I know that in coming up with the concept, the phrase that you guys gave me was elegant rusticity. And I think I've personally seen those elements fan out throughout the city. specifically whether it's in stoneware now becoming more and more common in restaurants, an appeal to seating being individual and unique to the space. A lot of that, I think, it was championed and well earned, well honed by Otium.
Questions from all of you? Yes.
I have one for Tim and for Chris. Either one of you, but I think really the furniture maker. In commercial restaurant seating, seats are usually timed for how long they're comfortable to sit in. Was this an element of your planning, or how did you arrive at the comfort of the seat?
Absolutely. To be honest, that was one of the first things that came to mind. You want a dining chair to be comfortable. It needs to function. Those elements that I was speaking to earlier in terms of height and position forward, back. But realistically, it's a restaurant. And for it to be sustainable, you have to turn tables. So we were trying to find the perfect balance between it being comfortable and yet not so comfortable that at the end of the meal, everyone is sitting back and just completely relaxing. Yeah, you'll see it in the chairs that are on display here, but we actually pitch the back legs forward, which is, it's hard to pull off a back leg pitched forward and still hit at the right spot without feeling like you're leaning over. So the chair does sit very upright, but then we hand sculpted those back rests on them, so it's just enough canter to make you feel at ease. So that's kind of how we addressed that issue.
What's your timing? 45 minutes, an hour?
I mean, Tim will speak more to the practicality of time frame that he wants a butt in the chair at the restaurant. But yeah, I accounted for, hey, we need to turn over. Now, that being said, I made a set of these chairs for my house, and I've had 4-hour dinner parties on them, and not a complaint from anyone in terms of comfort.
Yeah, I think that it's very versatile, but that was very, very, very much a part of the conversation, because it is true. I mean, we can't have people sitting there for a long period of time. You want them to sort of want to get up, want to stretch their legs. But it's difficult, right? I mean, we serve lunch, we serve dinner, we have midday. We have these different day parts. We have brunch. All of those require a specific amount of time. If you're coming in for pre-theater dinner. That's usually a shorter dinner. If you're coming in and you're celebrating something, or it's going to be like a longer coursed out meal, we have that as well. So I think Chris did an amazing job with that. What he's talking about is it's over my head. I don't know how to achieve what he's saying, but that's why you let an artisan do their job, do their work, their creativeness, and you set sort of parameters, or just bring it to their attention if it wasn't their attention before.
Thank
you. Yeah.
I'm just curious about using handmade ceramics. How do you have to handle that as an operation and sort of try to not break them, or is there a level of intensity of how you make them that they're able to throw them around and get food on the table?
You can't throw. Yeah. You can't throw ceramics around. Actually, when
them at the beginning of their life.
Right. Yeah. I remember when you were looking at different, and he kept coming back to the studio and like, okay, let's seeing the different shapes and the glazes, and he said, well, how strong are they? How strong are they? I said, they're really strong. Cone 10, we do reduction. And I said, okay, here, this is how strong. I said, they're going to break, though. And I took one and I threw it down on the ground, and his face was, it was asphalt, I mean, it was like, it's going to break, but they're, it was a bit dramatic.
As a chef, you have to treat plates differently.
Yeah, you have to train the staff.
How to work with them.
Yeah, you have to train the staff. I mean, it's when you go from hot to cold in temperatures, if it's really we have a high heat dishwasher, we hold plates in a heat cabinet. The heat cabinet can't be that hot, otherwise, it's those little things, from taking it out of a really hot plate cabinet and putting it on top of a stone countertop, that interaction right there weakens it. So I think we definitely took it into context as well. But another thing that we did is we actually serve and happily serve on plates that are not perfect. I think that when there is a little bit of a chip, you can't do it on a plate that's not made, it's not handmade. You really can't do it because it's like a chipped piece of glass or whatever. This is when you chip and you see the texture and you see the different layer, or some people even put gold in between and put plates back together, and I think that what that does is that just as the patina on the chairs or different things like that, it shows the life of that item, and I think the life and the story. I mean, I love antique furniture. I love antique things. It has a life. It's been somewhere. It has a story. Those things are great.
I have a question regarding ceramic ware. I think that it can be put into the oven, right? So for Tim, is there a dish in the restaurant that you serve that from oven to table?
I don't think there's one on the menu currently, but there are some that we have. We typically do it in like a rational oven or a combi oven that allows you to put steam as well. So a lot of like chawanmushi we've done in the past, where we were able to kind of steam a custard in the actual bowl and be able to serve it. So we steam it all minute. We steam it, in the moment, and as soon as it's ready, we give it to the guests. Yeah.
The fact that you're next to an art museum is interesting to me. I imagine you get a lot of diners who've just been to the museum and they're all stimulated and visually, cranked, and then they're hyper aware now of what's around them. At least that's how it has been for me. Did that give you a certain level of inspiration or something that you wanted to aspire to?
Yeah. I mean, I think, certainly being next to the art that they have in that museum is extraordinary. But I think that just like when you go into a museum and you go, you turn the corner, you go here, you go there, you read, you're constantly learning, you're constantly seeing something else. And I think that Odium has that same quality. If you go into the different rooms and the different spaces that we have, if you look up at the ceiling, if you look down at the floor, if you look at the way the bar is cladded, if you look at we even have, it was done by Stefan Stagmeister, a mural on the wall right when you walk in the door all the way to the back, that says outside in, inside out. There's so many people that come to the restaurant all the time that don't even know that there are words on there, and then they experience, they see it, and they're oh my God, I never noticed that. So I think just having kind of a lot going on without a lot going on, so you're able to sit in each room and kind of experience and hopefully have a different experience in those rooms, because you're seeing different things. You're seeing the wine room, and it's from floor to ceiling. Even the design and how we displayed the wine. I wanted to make sure that you didn't just look at the butts of the bottles. I wanted you to see the tip of the bottle, the base of the bottle, maybe some at a slant, like some sideways, like just to create interest with your eye. The same thing with the back bar and how that was developed, and the different textures that are there. So a lot of thought and care went into the design of it. They say thank you. I mean, thank you to you guys. You guys are the ones that are the artists that have allowed me to to fulfill my dream by opening up a restaurant like that. But I think, I think that it's I don't know, it's been amazing. It really has.
Yes.
Hi Tim, this question's for you. Was there a specific moment or experience that opened your eyes to appreciate handmade, like ceramics and woodwork and lighting? Because I know a lot of people aren't like really aware that some ceramics can be handmade, or like was it from your past job or something, a specific moment?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up doing construction with my dad, so I grew up working with wood, working with material. My dad, pretty much built the house that I grew up in by himself. He had a couple people help with the larger projects for a few days, but ultimately, he's a craftsman at trade, and he's a finishing carpenter, so he's always very, very much on me about the details and things. So I think through that experience, and then kind of working at the French Laundry for a long time, their attention to purveyors, not so much with the handcrafted stuff, to be honest with you. Yes, we did use some of it, but most of it was like porcelain plates, it's like that style, which was very, very popular for a long time. So trying to separate myself from that consciously and saying, what, I'm coming to Los Angeles, I'm not trying to open up the French Laundry. If I did, why would I leave the French Laundry? I already had a great job. So coming down here, I wanted it to be different. I wanted it to be meaningful for the next chapter of my life.
Thank you so much. Thank you, all of you. It's been a great conversation starting point. We're gonna stop here, but hopefully you all enjoy the exhibition, looking at the objects up close. And but thank you all for being here so much. It's been great to start this conversation.